as you heard, we're going to drill down into some local issues here. What I'm going to talk about here is the evolution of groundwater use in the lower Rio Grande, which is the area where Elephant Beat Irrigation District is. And this is going to, I know I'm preaching to the choir, you've all probably seen some similar trajectory in the areas you were working. But this is what it looks like down there. Elephant Beat Reservoir is about 100, let's call it 150 miles south of us here. That is at the upper end of the Rio Grande project, which is one of the oldest reclamation projects in the country. It delivers water to Elephant Beat Irrigation District in New Mexico, to El Paso County Water Improvement District number 1, who we'll call EP1 for short, and the country of Mexico. And it is unique. The Rio Grande project is somewhat unique in that the farmers, basically the federal government financed the construction of the project, and the farmers actually went and paid it off, which if you're getting cheap federal loans, you shouldn't be all that anxious to do it. But as you'll see, we went through a rather rough drought. The farmers really weren't too happy with Reclamation's performance during that time, so they took over the project, paying off their construction loans in 79 and 80. This is a quick hydrologic history of the project, and this is where I think you'll see a lot of the same swings throughout the southwestern United States. This is going to be a long shot, but here in the early years, when the Elephant Butte went online in 1916, the blue line you see is storage in Elephant Butte Reservoir, and that's a really good indicator of your drought status in New Mexico. It's how much water is in Elephant Butte. It's probably one of the best indicators in the state, in fact. The red line you see is the annual release from Elephant Butte. And to give you some sort of scale, a normal release under the Rio Grande Compact is stated to be 790,000 acre feet. And a lot of sausage making went into the arrival at 790,000 acre feet, not 800,000, 790. But if you're up there between 600,000 and 700,000 acre, 600,000 and 800,000 acre feet of release, you've got enough water to do what you want to do, not really stressed. When that red line is down there between 600,000 and 400,000, it's starting to tighten up. And then when you get below 400,000 acre feet, it is downright painful. So what you see is these distinct periods where in the very early years of the project, there was no shortage. In fact, the Bureau of Reclamation did not even tell farmers how much water they had. They just said, order water and we'll deliver it. Then the drought of the 50s came around, and I'm sure many of you have dealt with the drought of the 50s in other contexts. And you see the red line drops, the blue line drops. In fact, in the early 50s and again in the 70s, they ran Elephant Butte dry. They actually emptied Elephant Butte Reservoir, which was pretty unpleasant because they had massive fish kills and it was very unpleasant. But then we went through this period in the 80s and 90s where there was water everywhere. And when you got a water supply like that for 24 straight years, it kind of affects your thinking. It gets to feel normal, and it is anything but normal. In fact, that's probably the most anomalous time on this graph is that 80s and 90s. Well, in the late 90s, you see the reservoir, man, got the shakes here, just a long shot. You see the reservoir plummeting as it did going into the drought of the 50s. See the reservoir plummeting, and then we're bouncing around here in pretty miserable water supply conditions quite persistently. When the project was built, there was no shortage of surface water, so there was no need for groundwater. In fact, the groundwater use back before the drought of the 50s was almost all DCMI, domestic, commercial, municipal, industrial, almost all municipal and domestic use, very little for irrigation. That all changed in the 50s in response to the drought, and we've been in a very conjunctively managed system ever since. And the conjunctive focus is shifting more and more away from the original surface water and more towards the groundwater. This is what the crop mix has looked like over time, and as you see, this goes back to 1953, so the beginning of the early years of the drought. Back in the day, cotton was king, and so we had a whole lot of cotton, a whole lot of acreage. In fact, the full acreage in EBID is 90,640 acres, or 88,000 acres if you prefer. So you see we were up pretty close to capacity in the early years, and the reason with that water supply that you saw in the previous graph that we were able to do that was groundwater. In the years since, you've seen a general decline in total acreage, but a radical shift in crops away from cotton, which is generally considered to be a low water use crop, to pecans. And pecans are now the dominant crop in the area, and CIR for a healthy commercial pecan crop is about 4 feet. So they're applying 5 feet gross application. Crop uses about 4 feet. Definitely a switch from cotton, although some of the cotton on drip irrigation, the yields are getting suggest it's not a 2-foot crop anymore. Anyhow, reducing acreage, increasing unit depletion is the way it's gone. By the way, you see that white band in there, that's because we had some trouble with our data, and that didn't really happen, what you're seeing behind the blinds there. Pay no attention to what's behind there. Now, if we take a cut across the Mesilla Valley, which is the southern valley in Elephant Peak Irrigation District, this is what it looks like. You've got that skinny little, let's see if I can find it, that skinny little yellow layer there is the fairly young shallow river alluvium, generally unconsolidated river alluvium. And that's where most of the wells went in the drought of the 50s. Below that, you've got the upper, middle, and lower Santa Fe, which are also river alluvial aquifer systems. And you see that in the Mesilla Valley, you've got a couple of thousand feet of saturated thickness down there, so there's a lot of water in the ground. There are, saline brackish patches, there's a lot going on, but basically there's this groundwater reserve that, a lot of folks looked at it, and as was often done in the day, they considered it unlimited. Well, let's take a look at what happens. This is a conceptual cross-section. We divert water out of the Rio Grande into our canal system. We got seepage before we deliver any water to anybody, and quite a bit of seepage. We've got 300 miles of earthline canals. We irrigate, the crop takes its piece, excess deep percolation. We don't have much tailwater in this system. They tend to be closed basins, so we've got subsurface drainage, which goes to our drainage system, which returns to the river and is then available for diversion downstream. Well, if that's all we had, we never would have survived the drought in the 50s. So you see this huge, robust aquifer that I just showed you. At least it's huge and robust in the Mesilla Valley, not so much in the Upper Valley. And so when the farmer sticks, or a city, whoever, sticks a well in there and starts pumping, they are not creating new water, they're capturing water that would otherwise have been tributary to the river and available for water users downstream. Sound familiar? This is what our groundwater looks like. This was assembled by one of my colleagues in the Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources several years ago. But what you see, the blue line is a monitoring well that the Bureau of Reclamation put in back in the 40s. And you see back here in the wet period, it was doing a nice seasonal oscillation, then we hit the drought and it plummets, comes back with covers in the 80s and 90s and starts oscillating again, and then we hit the current drought, or climate change, if you prefer. And you'll notice she had to add another well because this one went dry right here in 2014, so she had to get a surrogate well to cover that dead spot. This is, I'm having to rush here because I always talk too much, but the annual project release from Caballo Reservoir is on the horizontal axis, and on the vertical axis is the project diversion, and that's to EBID El Paso #1 in Mexico. You see in the early years, a lot of water, then we go through the drought period, then the wet period again, and then this is the current drought, and you notice everything's shifted down. Well, if you're downstream, you look upstream and think, why is there no water? Why is there so much less water coming down? Well, that's where we stand now. We had settled our way to basically keep increasing groundwaters in New Mexico from affecting Mexico and EP1. That led to a lawsuit by New Mexico in 2011. Texas then filed suit in 2013. Trial and tribulations followed, and we are in this process very much now. In fact, Ryan and I are both up to our gills in it right now, so if you ask us some questions and we don't answer, please understand. But the bottom line is that when things get bad enough and the hammer gets big enough, it's time to take action, and that's pretty much where we are now. It's no longer a choice. We either figure out how to manage this ourselves, or we've got a federal water master telling us how to do it. So that's where we are. That's us from the International Space Station, by the way. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Ryan.